In the midst of a vast, endless maze of a forgotten civilization, you climb until you emerge in a grassy courtyard. In the distance, a white tower looms over the valley above the clouds. The only way to escape is up. The Last Guardian is a game that has been on my mind for quite some time. On my first playthrough, I struggled to connect with the game. The controls felt clunky, and Trico's AI could be annoyingly stubborn at times. But I persevered, and as time passed, I found myself thinking back again and again to The Last Guardian. What was it about this game that stayed with me long after I finished it? It's not the controls. The boy can sometimes feel too unresponsive, carrying too much momentum. It's not Trico's AI either. While often stubborn, it can be helmed efficiently if you know how it functions. No. What kept me coming back was the environment. There's something about how The Last Guardian presents its world that drew me in. Structured as an A to B adventure, it's a story about taking in your surroundings, the environment around you, and appreciating the journey itself. To understand, we have to look at how The Last Guardian cleverly uses its environment not just as a backdrop, but as a conduit for retrospection and meaning. It's about companionship. It's about struggle. It's about the wordless stories of a time long forgotten. Directed by Fumito Ueda and developed by Gen Design, formerly known as Team Eco, The Last Guardian takes place in an abandoned world nested in antiquity. Time has all but erased the purpose of its impossibly intricate and beautiful architecture. You play as a young boy who, by circumstance, must escape the ruins with the help of a mythical creature. And this is all the game gives you. The Valley, also known as the Nest, is an intricate area designed for the player to traverse along with Trico. What stands out is how the entire map maintains a sense of environmental continuity. From many points, you can see large swaths of the valley, including places you've been through on your journey to the top. One of my favorite things to do while playing is stop and look around to try and find places I recognize from earlier in the journey. Take, for instance, here, where you can see these tiny, spindly aqueducts in the distance that earlier looked massive when you stood underneath them. You can also catch glimpses of areas you'll traverse later. From here, you can see the scaffolds you'll climb later in the journey. And beyond those, you can see this half-constructed bridge you destroy as you escape on Trico. And once you reach those first scaffolds, look down to the right, and you can see the same vantage point you were just at. These constant visual reminders of where you've been and where you'll be going create a strong sense of progression. And of course, no matter where you stand, the White Tower always stands ever present. It's also by comparison to this singular landmark, the game communicates its impressive scale. Interestingly, This spatial continuity is broken only when the stone guards drag you through these doors that open directly into the Master of the Valley's chamber. These portals break the game's physical logic, making them all the more mysterious. They reinforce the mysticism surrounding the Master of the Valley. As you climb the many interconnected spires of the valley, the game invites you to attach meaning to the places you've explored. After all, these crumbling ruins would be just that, ruins, had you not triumphed over them to reach this point. It's here where The Last Guardian's sparse plot comes to fruition, focusing less on telling an intricate narrative and more on evoking feeling. In that sense, it's more in line with fables and myths than traditional narratives. But through it all, the environment remains at the forefront, the most present conflict to overcome. The space feels real, or at least the illusion of space feels real. This stands in stark contrast to how many games treat their settings as mere backdrops to the active gameplay systems, acting as transitory locations between plot beats. The Last Guardian, on the other hand, treats each moment in its setting with equal importance. The game also incorporates its puzzles and moment-to-moment gameplay seamlessly into the environment. Sections are designed to organically guide the player. Because the puzzles aren't ostensibly branded as puzzles, your immersion rarely breaks, allowing for the game's environmental artistry to flourish. On a broader scale, the Valley's design, focused on verticality, shapes how players experience a sense of progression. When you climb higher to reach the White Tower, you're making progress in the narrative. And when you inevitably fall back down, you're experiencing a narrative rock bottom. In this way, your physical place in the world is tied to your emotional journey. Looking at it all, you can see how the game's environment has been meticulously and intentionally designed to immerse players in its world and story. Some of my favorite moments from The Last Guardian occur when you're hundreds of feet above the ground, precariously navigating ancient mechanisms. The wind howls, and distant birds scatter like tiny specks of white across the sky. The artistic achievement present is creating the illusion of being perilously high among enormous ruins through use of comparative scale. Overlooking everything, you can see how these towers, each one large enough to be castles on their own, have visibly crumbled with time. Their once populated halls now lie in decay, invaded by lush vegetation and illuminated by striking beams of light. Light is the game's most deliberate visual motif. Moments of excitement and peril are broken up by quiet pauses, often illuminated by light pouring through windows or slipping through cracks in the wall. These spaces between spaces highlight the contrast between light and dark. And while light can define physical form, it can also symbolically define the form of memory. It's as if in these moments, the game asks you to pause and reflect on what just happened, to create meaning through retrospection. These instances of sunlight spilling into grass-covered halls remind me of the Japanese concept of ma, intentional gaps or negative spaces meant to set the stage for introspection. Ma can manifest in physical spaces, like the contours of an open window or a courtyard bathed in light. But it can also manifest in more abstract ways. An absence of action or plot progression sets the stage for moments of retrospection. The beats in between action-filled moments in stories are havens for rumination. Therefore, the concept of Ma manifests within this game's environment, and, by extent, within its pacing. Sometimes absence, gaps in the noise, can say more than you think. The concept of Ma appears in more places throughout the game. The world, much like Shadow of the Colossus, is filled with ambiguous spaces that invite players to fill the gaps. Despite all of its artistic grandeur, the environment has a hollowness, urging players to construct context around its lore. It's a defining trait of Ueda and Gen Design's philosophy when crafting their worlds, that they're felt, experienced. For example, the player and Trico find themselves in the middle of a giant fighting pit. Because the story takes place long after the existence of this civilization, the exact purpose of the Colosseum is unknown. But that's the point. The game wants you to make up your own story. Maybe this is where citizens would go to watch Tricos battle gladiators, or maybe even other Tricos. Or look at the White Tower. Its construction is notably different compared to its surroundings. The White Tower is smooth, rounded, and uniform in contrast to the stone, wood, and metal of the rest of the valley. And the inside of the tower is cold and empty. At its base rests a white sepulchre, a tomb nested in the valley's depths. So the question arises, is the White Tower an original part of the valley? Or is it an alien parasite that one day landed here? Who or what is in the tomb? While there are no explicit answers, the environmental design succeeds in inspiring the player to fill in the gaps, to fill in the negative spaces in the game's lore. Just look at how creators like Nomad Colossus have made a lasting mark on the Shadow of the Colossus community with their investigations into that world. I believe a similar level of scrutiny is due for this game. Through careful observation of the environment, players can piece together their own lore, interweaving their own journey with Trico into the fold. It's this reductive, less is more approach of storytelling that makes Ueda's games so special. Once you and Trico reach the top of the White Tower, you can finally see the valley in its entirety. It's here where the journey is encapsulated. The environment, the places you've pushed through, all presented in one view. Here, in the end, you can trace everywhere you have been. What once seemed like monumental obstacles at the time are now made small and distant. And, of course, sunlight shines bright atop the tower. This is the moment where players are meant to pause and reflect. Those conflicts that seemed gargantuan, those towers that at one time seemed impossibly tall, have now been conquered. They are in the past. A memory. It's like how, despite all my frustrations with this game, those issues have faded with time and distance, leaving only an insurmountable appreciation for its artistry. Considering all we've covered, it feels right that The Last Guardian is a story framed in the past tense. The game begins with children discovering the mirror once used by the boy, prompting him, now a much older man, to recount his extraordinary story. Told in retrospect, the story itself is much like the environment and how it preserves the past. The very core of The Last Guardian lies in its environmental design, making it one of the most emotional and introspective experiences games have to offer. In the midst of a vast, endless maze of a forgotten civilization, you stand atop a white tower as a dense fog rolls in, obscuring the ground far below. The sun shines brightly on your face. You were once down there, at the bottom, below the clouds. It's a distant memory. Look at how far you've come.